Thank you everyone for being here. I am Kate Bennett and I lead the education work at United Way of Central Iowa. So I'm very happy to be here moderating this panel. For those of you not as familiar with United Way's work in education, we kind of run the gamut from prenatal to high school graduation. And our goal for 2020 was 95% high school graduation for our 3-county area, which is Polk Warren, Dallas County. So 20 school districts. We were really close. Our last year, we were at 93.4 or 93.7. And we had really reason to believe that we would make the goal because we were doing some push efforts with Des Moines Public Schools specifically. Last summer of 2019, we had a summer graduation for kids that missed the May cutoff. And usually DMPO summer graduation is around 60 kids. We had almost 140 graduate. So that was a big chunk of kids that wouldn't have likely have graduated. So we're excited and we still have a chance, but we were hoping to replicate that push this spring and summer, and COVID happened. So as you know, United Way moves forward with what's next for us beyond 2020. Obviously, we won't ever abandon education or graduation or anything like that, but we're hoping to look at things with a more of an equity lens and obviously with COVID, a recovery lens. So all of this conversation really helps us think about how we move forward. So thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and I think I'll start with Gabi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabi Guerra. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I am the Assistant Director of Alexito. And at Alexito, we provide programming for Latino youth. We really are helping build their leadership development, and we do that through college prep, career development, civic engagement, family support, and the celebration of culture. But during the pandemic, we've really expanded our services to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our families because the pandemic has worsened food insecurity and housing insecurity and financial instability. We've created some additional supports to help them through this time.
How about Peter?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter LeBlanc. I am a principal in Des Moines Public Schools. I was a principal for 5 years at King Elementary, and I was a principal the past 4 years at Goodrow Middle School, and now I'm a principal on special assignment in in the Office of Talent Support, specifically working on our efforts for equity and anti-racism, and trying to achieve our board goals.
Boaz? You're on mute.
Oh, very sorry. Oh, wow. Thank you, Kate. My name is Boaz Nikingi. I am the Executive Director for iCoach, which stands for Iowa Congolese Organization and Center for Healing. We primarily serve refugees and immigrants who are still adjusting to the American culture. I am a former refugee. Understands the struggles and what it takes to get where you need to be. And we've been helping families with a lot of services, transportation being our biggest challenge we've faced in the past few years. But when COVID started, then we had a lot of challenges with education, with kids being home, not being supported by their own parents, not because they don't want to help them, but because they don't have the means to help them. So we've stepped up and assisted a lot of kids with virtual learning assistance, but we also have after school programs even before COVID started, that we were helping kids who were falling behind with their academics, mainly in math and reading. So we're still doing that with the current situation. We might even do it even more, but we don't know. For the safety of our families and clients, we'll see what happens. But that's an overall of what we do, and we're so thankful that we can do that.
How about John?
Hello, y'all. I actually am getting a bunch of texts from parents being like, are y'all going to be open next week for full virtual? Hello, everybody. My name is John Douglas. I am the executive director over at the Wilkie House. We are a historically Black nonprofit youth development center serving youth K through 8th grade here in the Des Moines urban core. So we have after school program, which is now full day, summer program, tutoring assistance, as well as mentoring program coming in. Our biggest push is just to be able to help as many families as we can. I know we'll be talking about COVID and some of the things going on. That has just highlighted our purpose even more, especially because as nonprofits that work with families of color, we understand, I mean, the grand majority of my families are essential workers or work in healthcare. So making sure that we can do what we can while staying as safe as we all can has really been our biggest push, and I know that's the same for the rest of those on the panel.
Sorry. Peter, did you go already for introductions?
Yes, I did.
Sorry, it's blending together.
You're good.
So everyone's introduced themselves, right? See, this is where I need Kate and Cheryl. Okay, so I will kick the first question to Peter since I have now made him feel badly. Looking at education in 2020, I know COVID is all on our minds, obviously, but with COVID, you certainly talk about how COVID has impacted kids of color, but also, you know, aside from COVID, all the other things going on surrounding social justice, equity issues in the schools, and how do you feel that kids of color are impacted in 2020, or what does education look like for them in 2020? Is he frozen? How about John Douglas, you answer that?
All right, and I'll try to change it up a little bit from the last panel that we had really talked about the things, but previously in the last panel, we really hit funding hard. That was a main aspect for our youth, especially youth of color, and services that they are really able to receive in general. I would also like to touch upon just the educators training as well. One of the big things with the educators training is understanding who and where our kids come from, moving from that one size fits all to recognizing our cultural and contextual influences and differences that we all have. I know a lot of us have been learning or have been teaching on implicit bias and unconscious bias. And I think that that's going to be really important for our youth moving forward, making sure that they are able to be seen in the classroom and that the curriculum really does speak to them. And not only speak to them, but they can speak to it. There we go. I like that even better. That they can speak to the curriculum. See, I'm making stuff up as I go. And I think that goes to kind of what Peter, Gabby, and Boaz were talking about in the last panel, where if we are not meeting our kids where they are, if we are not talking about the things that interest them, then they are not going to be doing the things that we really see as important for them to learn and to really progress as a generation.
Gabby, do you want to weigh in on that one?
I will hit on some of the same things that I hit on last time. But I did want to talk about how some of the things that are impacting our youth with their education in this time of COVID are some of the same things that we saw pre-COVID. So we're talking about how Iowa Latino youth live in poverty. That's 42% compared to 13% of non-Latinos. And that nearly 100% of Alexito parents work in manual labor and service positions. A lot of our families during COVID lost their jobs or had to cut their hours and didn't have access to government assistance. So they couldn't apply for unemployment checks. So they were left without support. So a lot of community organizations stepped up to fill in that gap for them during that time. But all of these things continue to affect our students in education when they have to worry about if there's going to be food at the table, if their parents are stressed out over their financial stability, if they're going to lose their house. Those things affect how they are doing in school. So Alexito actually created a program called Compa en Camino, which is Partner on Call, to help some of our families with those issues. So we're providing resources. So if a youth calls and says, I don't have food, I need food, I'm hungry, we take food to them. I don't have supplies to do this project, we bring the supplies. I'm taking care of my siblings because my parents work all day and I'm home alone with them and I need to take this test. We will send somebody to go babysit their brother or sister while they're taking that test. So we're trying to make their life a lot easier. That's what we need to do during this time and moving forward, because some of these things, like I said, are just worsened because of the pandemic, but they existed before. So really trying to serve our kids and make things easier for them as they try to achieve their education goals.
Thank you. Boaz, do you want to talk a little bit about what 2020 education is looking like for the populations that you're serving?
Yes, I would love to talk about that. So we've, sorry, I have to say that for us, things are not looking good. And, you know, like I said previously, we have about, I mean, more than 200 kids, young people who are behind with their academics. So that's a pretty big number. And we're still trying to assessing how that happened and what can we do to help, because it looks like that our kids are not, you know, doing well in schools. And we've had conversations with different kids who are experiencing some of those challenges. We understand language being one of the priority. I mean, a lot of kids are facing language barriers, and this has created a lot of confusion between teachers and students. I'm just going to give an example. We currently a lot of kids who are being served in the special ed education, which we think should not be there. But because there was a lack of communication between schools and parents and kids themselves, the fact that kids are still learning English, we strongly believe that it should not be the reason for them to be in special ed education, because these are kids who can pick up things very fast, but maybe because the schools don't have time to spend with these kids, maybe teachers are busy helping other students, then they start referring them to special ed educations. So that's a big challenge. Like I said, a lot of kids are 2 or 3 grades behind in math and reading. So it's very heartbreaking, and we're just trying to do what we can to help some of these kids. which is where my friend Gabi talked about, how as communities, we can all come together and cooperate and help one another in making sure that kids are doing well in schools. But overall, we're not where we want to be.
I did want to add one more thing that Boaz mentioned. We actually run into the opposite problem where some of our students who are not ELL and should be in special education classes aren't designated that way. So then they're not receiving the help that they need. So we actually experience the opposite of that. And so we really have to be there for our families to make sure that we're helping advocate so they can get the services that they need.
And Peter, how about for you from the district perspective?
Yeah, so we took advantage this summer of an opportunity to ask our kids and our families and our community that question during our anti-racist town halls, where we had, I believe we had about 5 of them. And we had participation from parents to community members to staff members, down all the way down to the students. And the data we received back from that was, quite frankly, a wake-up call for us. It was things that we thought we knew, but hearing it from being there and hearing it out of the kids' mouths is a whole nother thing. And it was an experience, quite frankly, that shook me and prompted me to step up and lean in and show up for this work that we have to do to provide a more equitable education and equitable opportunities for our kids. Because our kids told us that they do not see themselves in the curriculum and what we're teaching. They do not have a voice. They do not have a say in what it is that they're learning. They are telling us that, hey, guess what? We want teachers and educators and leaders of schools that look like us. We need to see that that is something that I can aspire to be. Our kids are saying, we want to talk about social justice. We want to talk about race. We want to talk about social emotional learning. We want to have those conversations in school. But we as the adults, they don't feel like we as the adults are not as confident in teaching those things and having those conversations as we are in teaching the content that is there, that we're there to teach. And so those things came out loud and clear. And at the end of the day, we have 33,000 students that we serve across the city, and they're walking into our buildings day after day having that feeling of I don't belong. You're gonna make me sit here and learn about this stuff that I'm never gonna use, that I don't see myself in at all. Or you're not explaining to me why I have to learn this. It's just about you have to learn it because it's part of school. Much like many of us on this call experienced when we were in school. You just did it because that's and you learned it because that's what they told you to. But our kids they have a lot more access to information now. And some of these things that we put in front of them, they're like, I can go Google that. I can go find that out real quick. I want to have this deeper conversation and learn about these things. And quite frankly, those are the things that we want our kids to learn and be able to do. How do we problem solve? How do we have conversations with people who we agree with? And especially, how do we have conversations and dialogue with people we don't agree with? How can we stop seeing that C word conflict as a negative thing all the time? Because being in conflict doesn't always have to be a negative thing if we have the skills and the ability to have a conversation and use the power of our words that we have. And so those are things that our kids of color are walking into our schools every day experiencing right now. And we know that because they told us. And so now it becomes now what? And so now what do we do? And what are we going to do about those things? So now we have, and I'm not sure if I'm going into another question you had or not, so you can stop me if okay. So now we have students who are working with our curriculum team, who are at the table and a part of the conversation and a part of doing audits of the curriculum to say yes and no, and I don't see myself in that, or to ask those questions and interrogate things a little bit. We have students in one of our high schools who are now a part of that school leadership team. So they're part of that decision-making process. And when we think about that, they are actually learning some great skills with being a part of those teams and a part of that dialogue. And so those are just those are some of the things that we are trying to do so we can begin to incorporate their voice and have them be a part of the process. Because so often what we've done in education is we've done things to kids instead of done things with kids. And the more we can shift that to with, the more they're going to see themselves and take ownership of that learning and ownership of that education. And they will have the skills when they go out to perform and do the things that they want to do once they leave us.
And Kate, if it's okay, I would love to piggyback on what Peter was talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so I love that DMPS is going out of their way, because they don't have to do this. They are going out of their way to make sure to hear our youth voices. And especially when he was talking about the fact that many of our youth don't feel like they are either represented within who they work with in the schools, or that the curriculum does not really speak to them. And I think that also goes down to not necessarily, and this is where I make sure the kids know, it's not your teacher's fault. It's not even the school's fault. Their hands are slightly tied within what they're able to teach. And for our kids not feeling as if they're represented, that just comes down to the Eurocentric view that I assume all of us were old enough, that's all we learned. My kiddos oftentimes complain, Mr. John, I'm tired of hearing about slavery. I got to write another paper about slavery. There has to be more than just that. So, for example, at the Wilkie House, we utilize an Afrocentric curriculum. We make sure that our kids are learning things that they might not have learned in school. We spent an entire week in the summer learning about Black female inventors. Many people that I know couldn't even name one. I don't know what Columbus discovered, but my kids sure were going to learn about Indigenous Peoples Day. They are going to be able to learn about the Latinx culture. These are things that as nonprofits and as people outside of the school, as the school builds up that curriculum, as they really learn from their youth, this is where we can really come in. I know somebody had posted a question about what recommendations do we have to teach social justice and racism, especially from white teachers. The biggest thing is going outside of your comfort zone. Feel weird, feel awkward. Go out and be the only white person in a group. Make yourself go out of your way to feel uncomfortable, so then you have a better idea of what our kids feel like, being some of the only youth of color in some of their schools, or the fact that they aren't represented within the staff around their schools, or what they're learning. And I know many of our other panel members agree, and that's kind of the approach that we use, is to teach our youth what they feel they want to learn that otherwise they are not getting.
And I did want to add two things to that as well, both for Peter and John's points. The first thing that I wanted to add was talking about that sense of belonging. A lot of our Latinx youth in the past school year, reported an increase in racial attacks in their schools. And this is across the state of Iowa, because we are in over 18 communities. So what does that say about our kids' safety in schools? How do they come to school, and are they engaged, or are they thinking about what the student or a teacher is going to say about them, or is going to talk about? So that really impacts how they're doing in school. We did a mental health assessment on all of our kids. Same thing. Those things keep coming up over and over again because they really impact the way that they are going to learn and be engaged in a classroom. And the second thing that I wanted to touch on, again, that representation and teaching that history. For Alexito, we really focus on teaching our youth about Latinx history and talking about how Latinos are not a monolith. We are very, very diverse. And so it's important for all of us to know and be empowered in that information so they can go out and teach those things as well. But then when we're talking about changing curriculum and having new teachers, I feel like that is going to help making our youth feel more welcome, right? Because if a whole classroom is learning about Latinx history and Black history and really, really engaged in learning about it, we are creating new ideas and creating a new welcoming atmosphere to kind of break down those negative impacts that we're seeing right now. But if we're not moving forward in those areas, we're going to keep, our youth are going to keep experiencing those same things. So those are the two things that I wanted to add.
So I'm going to ask a little bit of a different question than I did in the first panel, because everyone's brought it up and it's something that has weighed on my mind. I know I look young, but I've been doing this almost for 20 years, believe it or not. And I feel like in our community and at United Way and all of us, we've had times where we've done a better job of engaging families and then a not so good job of engaging families. And a couple of you have mentioned that it's important that we engage families. And do you have suggestions for any of us, for United Way or for any of the other people on the call that are attempting to work with families? Because sometimes it can feel like it's more trouble than it's worth because it's so difficult and we never know what's the right time. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in of like, well, should we do it before school, after school, during school, pizza, you know, what is the hook to get families? And we know families, they all care about their kids' education, but how do they want to be involved and what's a good way to do it?
I would say the first thing, especially for us as nonprofits, is being flexible. To say we're in an ever-changing environment right now, I would say would be a massive understatement. I mean, even today with the news that we'll be going back virtual on Monday, our parents are stressed out. We need to be those people who can speak with them and make sure that anger is not the start of the conversation. Make sure that they know DMPS is doing all that they can. And the number one thing that we want from y'all is the safety and success of your kids. So being able to hear their frustrations, it's a lot of time on the phone. I am not usually a big texter, but man, my families have gotten me into it. I even know some of the LOL is not lots of love, OMDW. There's a lot of them out there. I'm starting to get them. All right. But I would say being flexible as organizations is going to be the number one thing. We cannot expect DMPS to do it all. It's just not feasible. That's why it's so important that we have organizations similar to what Gabi and Boaz are involved in to make sure. I know for a fact I can't do everything. So making sure that we can work with the populations we can work with, as diverse as they are, as linguistically diverse, culturally diverse as they are, making sure that we are being flexible, and then that communication aspect. And I'll let the other panel members speak more on that, but I would definitely say being flexible and having our parents know that we support them, because we know this is stressful. We know that you're losing hours, that your kids, I mean, honestly, if your kids are home all day, they probably driving you crazy. The likelihood is probably 90%, 99%. So making sure that they know that we are supportive and willing to be flexible and working with them.
Gabi, do you want to talk a little bit about your families?
So some of the things that come to mind when it comes to working with our families is building that rapport and that trust, right? So if you are an organization that might not have those community ties, then you need to make sure that you're partnering with an organization that does. So who knows the people in the families in the community that would be the best connectors, so you can get that information out there. I know some of the ways that we connect with our families. well, used to before pandemic, we have 2 pretty big family events during the year. And that's when we take the opportunity to share information that is important and timely, right? So what's happening in the community and what do we think that our families need to know about? That's some of the things that we're going to present. And then we also take the time to always have a discussion around education, right? So what's going on at the MPS, or what's going on in Hampton or in Marshalltown or wherever we're doing our event, and bringing in administrators from the district so then they can start meeting people, or we have teachers there and they can be connected with them. So we try to be that bridge so we can connect our families. And I think that trust is key, right? So if I call my families and immediately I can speak Spanish and I can have a nice conversation ahead of time, they're going to know that they can talk to me and they can text me with questions and call me. And that is what ends up happening. I get calls all the time, questions all the time about things that I usually can't answer, but I can connect them with somebody else that can. So it does take a long time to build that trust, but it is very important that you start those conversations and that you continue to nurture those relationships, because they can't be transactional. They can't just be for a one-time thing. You have to continue building them.
And I would just echo the points of the other panelists, as well as, that what it is that collaborative problem solving process, and also recognizing that as frustrating as it can be for us as organizations, it's equally as frustrating for the families that we're trying to serve too. And so we have to, going into it, we have to remember that, and that there is some sort of barrier going on, and there's a reason why there's that disconnect. And so often we let frustration get in the way of problem solving what that disconnect is, and leveraging and using our partners to come and support us in having those conversations and finding out who has those, like Gabby said, who has those connections? And let's partner with them, because there's a level of trust there that we don't have. And that trust and that sense of belonging could actually mean, let us take a step back and be a visitor in the process, and let someone else step up and lead in the process. And we visit and learn, and from that learning, figure out where can we enter into the relationship. And so I think that those are just a couple of things that we could do, and a couple of things, and something that we often, and I'll just speak for myself, I won't speak for anybody else, that even often as a school leader, that I had to remember that the frustration that I might be feeling because I can't get in contact with this person, or we've set this meeting up 3 times and they can't show up, they couldn't show up. There is something more there. And until I figure out what that something more is, I shouldn't be getting frustrated. I should be, so that in itself is a message that I need something else, or I need something different than you're able to give me or provide for me.
Boaz, do you want to talk about how you think it would be good for schools, or your nonprofit or other nonprofits to engage with the Congolese parents that you work with?
Yeah, so there are different ways that educators, schools or other service providers can do this. Maybe what works for me doesn't work for Gabi or John or Peter or somebody else, but at least we try. So I just kind of want to echo a little bit about what Peter and Gabi said. Like, we experienced a lot of service providers or educators making assumptions on certain different things, but not willing to take time to really learn about the kids and the families background, which has created even more challenges to families. how, you know, kids react to certain things, what causing that, you know, what's the background of that, you know, what's the history of, I mean, those questions needs to be answered from the school standpoint, and from the parents' standpoint, so that we can all work together to solve some of the problems, rather than just making assumptions, or this child or this parent, they're like that and that and that, but not, you know, taking steps forward to learn about, you know, the history of the family, and, you know, what, you know, have had happened maybe in the past for the family that triggers what's going on at that specific moment. I will also echo what John said, being in your comfort zone. A lot of the families have places where they like to hang out. If that's not a place that you like, but the community likes that place, you know, that's your test. Are you gonna pass it or are you gonna fail it? So we've seen that as a big challenge to schools and educators and service providers. Like, they have their office. If this thing is not happening in my office or at my school or at my community center, I am not going there. I am not being part of that. So take time. I mean, take step forwards. You know, go to those community centers, go to those apartment complexes, go to those, you know, I know we have a lot in the community, in the refugee and immigrant populations. We have a lot of kids who are very involved with faith-based organizations, and that's where they can have a space or a place where they can meet and talk about these issues. I know religion, it's something that people don't want to talk about in this country, but if that's a place where they can sit down and learn and talk about issues, then let's meet them there. Let's not be afraid of going to that place, because if we do, then how else are we gonna be able to reach out to them? Schedules. John talked about schedules. A lot of these parents or kids, maybe they're only available in the weekend. I know maybe you don't want to take some time out of your weekend where you have to spend time with your family and friends, but if that's what you gotta do, please do it, because then if you don't do it, then it's gonna be hard for you to connect with that specific group or that family. So my friends shared really great thoughts. I really appreciate the sharing. And we're always available to help. Gabi talked about, and that I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier. Like what we've seen is, believe it or not, a lot of these communities, they're even comfortable with their community organizations, because I always tell my friends that when your doors are locked up because of, it's 5 o'clock, you gotta go home, my door is still open, because these people, they know where I live. They will come get me. As soon as I clock out from my workplace, they will still come find me at home, and I'll still help them. So there's a lot of stuff that, when we talk about these issues and challenges, we really mean them, and because we've been through them, and we want to be part of the solution as we move forward to support families.
Thank you. Gabi, were you going to add one more thing?
No, I was just clapping.
Oh, you're clapping. Okay, sorry.
Same here. You rocked it, Boaz. Thank you.
Well, should we go to the chat? I think we have a couple questions. Sanjita or Cheryl, do you want to tell us what those are?
Cheryl, go ahead.
Okay. I'll do the first one, you do the next. This question came that I understand that white teachers may not be the best choices to teach BIPOC kids about racism and other social justice issues. What recommendation do you have for white educators?
And I would say, why not? As long as you don't take the approach like you know what it's like to be the person of color in that situation, but if you're having that conversation from the white perspective, and then you have done the learning and the unlearning of just the historical context of race relations in this country, that is a great opportunity to connect with kids and give kids the opportunity to see you in a new way, that you are invested in this continuous learning process that we're all going through as a part of being adults. That, oh, I didn't realize that voter suppression was happening. It looked like a reading test in the past. Today, it is, hey, in the city of Houston, where I'm from, there's almost 5 million people. Yet there's only one place in the center of the city where you can drop off your ballot. So it just looks different, but those things still exist. And it's just about that learning and unlearning. It's when we tell ourselves that, no, I'm not the best choice, then that gives us an excuse not to do it. And so to just say, hey, guess what? I'm learning about this, and I'm not going to step over that line and say, oh yeah, I know what it was like to be, I know what it's like to be a person of color in this situation. This is what it looks like from the white perspective of someone learning about the institutional issues and the institutional structures and systems that are marginalizing and oppressing people.
And I wanted to add something as well. I'm not an educator, but I do remember what it was like being an immigrant and going through the public school system. And I remember in 6th grade, I was a 6th grader at Goodrill actually, and I wrote my essay on Shakira, because she was my idol at the time. And it made such a huge difference to me that my teacher loved Shakira and had all of her albums and listened to her music. So this might not feel as related, but I do think that it's important, like everybody else said, get out of your comfort zone. What kind of media are you consuming? What kind of art are you consuming? Music, shows, things like that. Those things will make a difference when you're having a conversation with your youth. So if you're moving outside of your usual, I think that'll really make a difference as well.
And I would add in, kind of like Peter was saying, don't try to say, I know how you feel, or my experience is. Guide the conversation, present facts, and set up a conversation so the kids really take it from there. You just guide it to make sure they are able to stay on task. Because the kids have a lot of experience, kind of like Peter was saying, it's really easy for them to just Google this information. So I think we don't give kids enough credit for their own experiences, their own knowledge, and their own ability to find things out. So making sure that you are educated on the topic in which you're going to be teaching, and that instead of just teaching it, you guide a conversation. And just that little change in your thought process will make it go so much more smoothly.
And another thing that I was just thinking about too, making sure that we are validating our students' feelings in those conversations, right? Because like we said, they are experiencing this firsthand. I know my sister is in high school right now, and she shared with me some comments when the election was happening. A student shared in the classroom, I'm really stressed out about the election, and was quickly dismissed and was like, well, you're really young. You don't have to worry about that stuff. But that's not the reality for our kids. And so we have to make sure that we are validating and understanding where they are coming from, because those instances will be remembered for a long time. So we have to be really careful with the things that we say.
Is there another question that we should try to get to?
There is, and this is really for all four of our panel members. Are your students, your team teachers, is there pressure to teach to the assessments? Are we assessing the right things? Would you please respond?
Peter, you want to lead off with that one?
Sure, I could go there. There is an assessment that we are accountable for, that we are held accountable for as schools in the state of Iowa. That's the politically correct answer for me to say. Now, what do we know about assessments and the content of the assessments and who those assessments are designed for? They're not designed for all of our kids to be successful in them. There's often some background knowledge that or some things presented in those assessments that quite frankly don't have anything to do with kids who live in the state of Iowa. And so yes, we are held accountable to the state assessment, but that does not preclude us from teaching kids what we know they need to learn. And that does not stop us from letting us see themselves in what we teach them and not having their voice at the table and being a part of what happens to them in education. So we don't feel that we don't feel that pressure. The pressure that we feel is to make sure that our kids are on grade level and are reading, and they can read, and that they can write, and that they can do the mathematics needed once they leave high school, and whether they decide to open the door of trade school or go into the workforce, or even those that want to move on to college, to make sure that they have the level of education they need in order to be successful in whichever path they choose they want to go into.
Well, I'll go next. So I know teachers have, they gotta do assessments, and it's hard for us as service providers or community members to tell the teachers what needs to be assessed. But I'm just gonna echo what Peter said. There's no doubt that assessments are not for all. If there can be ways that these assessment can be inclusive, I think that will make things easier. And also when these assessments are being done, what teachers are looking for is also another questions that we can ask. And I'm just gonna ask, from my refugee experience, that when we get assessments, it's hard for us to read the assessments. Like what was the teacher looking for when they assessed our kids? Are they looking at the language barriers? Are they looking at behavior? Are they looking at academic performance? To be honest with you, I'm still not sure. And this is from my experience talking to parents, that there's a high of expectations when it comes to assessments, but what has been done at the ground level, at the foundation, to help kids be where they need to be is the question that a lot of parents still have at this point.
And I think this kind of precludes the assessments themselves, but how teachers get to the point of assessing their students. One of my favorite research studies I've ever seen are teachers were asked, do you treat your students differently? Of course, teachers say, no, I treat my students of color, my low income students, and the rest of my students all the same. Then they came in and put up cameras in their classrooms, and the teachers got to see how their reactions to student behavior, the consequences that were given to the youth, the teachers' emotional reactions to students of color. I mean, these teachers were like, holy crap, I never would have guessed that I actually do it, but now I can visualize it. Now I can see it. And from that, they were able to grow and they were able to increase the assessment scores or test scores of their students because they realized implicit and unconscious bias is real and it even affects me. And I think that's something that all of us, every single person on here, could benefit from, just to notice how we treat students differently, even though we might not want to admit it to ourselves or that we're even aware it happens. So that kind of precludes the assessment aspect, but it goes directly into how are you preparing your students for that?
Do we have one more quick question? So I know we're running up against it.
There is one more. Panel, if you would like to weigh in on, is there a plan or conscious efforts to encourage our kids to come back and be part of our education team, whether it's in a school system or in one of our community partners groups?
In DMPS, we have Dream to Teach, and it starts in middle school. And we are working on strengthening that program because its intent is to provide the students with the opportunity to be a part of the learning process from middle school all the way, and learn about teaching from middle school all the way through high school. And then upon graduation from college, then come back and you would be guaranteed an interview. But there are some things that we need to do to tighten up that program and strengthen that program as far as connecting with the students while they're in college, and staying connected and establishing a relationship that is, all right, when you have that practicum opportunity, come on back. Hey, when you have that student teaching opportunity, come on back, and just having that connection. And even to the point of, is it you are guaranteed an interview, or do we need to do a little more than that? So those are things that we're working on, but we do currently have a program in place.
Anyone else have thoughts to add to that? Otherwise, I'll wrap up. But
I did want to add, with Alexito, we do several things to make sure that our youth are learning about education careers. So we do have that Meet the Leaders event once a year, where our kids meet professionals from different industries, including education. So we're connecting them with professionals, and they do kind of speed mentoring there during that night, but then they stay connected with those folks if they're interested. And then we do specialized college visits and make sure that our students are meeting with professors, staff, and faculty at different universities around the state. So one, they can see themselves on college campuses. So they're meeting with Latinx staff and students and professors. So they see themselves on campus, and then they start thinking about, is this a career that I want to pursue? And we do this every year. So if we start with our students in 6th grade, by the time that they graduate, they will feel very, very comfortable being on a college campus and will have a better idea of what they want to do once they graduate. And the other thing is, we want to make sure that all of our kids have access to all their options, right? So it's not always just a 4-year institution. Do they want to do a 2-year? Do they want to do a trade school? We want to make sure that all their options are available and that they understand how each of them works. That way they can decide what works best for them at that time, and that we can help them through that process.
Okay, thank you all. I think, do we have another link to go to a closing session? Is that my
You know,
understanding? Okay,
I've just learned that I think they're just kind of appreciating the good conversations and that we can kind of roll as we need to here and or conclude when we need to, but they're not going to do that last 5-minute closing session. So this is us right here to be able to have that conversation.
okay,
You can thank and add your comments and wrap up, Kate.
yes, of course. Well, thank you so much. So the panel did double duty. They did this twice. So we tried to ask a little bit different questions. Thank you all for listening so intently, and thanks for your great
Kate.
thoughts. Yes.
I would like to point out one thing, and I feel like it hasn't come up yet, especially since many of these individuals work in nonprofits. Please do not be afraid to ask the community and businesses for assistance. This may not be politically correct, but Cheryl and Kate invited me and they know me, so I'm gonna roll with it. This is the first time in my life, at least, that the general population of the US has really cared and are willing to invest in youth of color, as well as low-income youth. Take advantage of that. I've been, so many organizations and businesses have reached out asking, what can we do for you? I mean, the BLM movement was a movement for a reason. We have to keep this rolling. If we aren't engaging these businesses and the communities, honestly, my biggest fear is, all right, Biden wins presidency, racism gone, we all good. I was real happy for the summer that we had with the movement. No, it's up to us to keep this rolling and getting buy-in from the businesses and the community members to do so, making sure they know this isn't just about toilet paper and hand sanitizer. All right, like, oh, we are doing double, triple duty by staying open full time. We're usually in after school. We're open all day now. Extra food, extra staffing hours, utilities, all these things end up stacking up overall and are hard on our budgets. The community and businesses are willing to help. And we should take advantage of that to make sure that we keep them engaged and we keep these conversations moving forward. And I got a feeling many of you have that same exact fear, that now things have changed, we're going to go back to normal. Well, screw that. Most of us don't want to go back to normal. We want to be able to advance so that we can see some true change come out of what's been going on these past 6 months.
I think John just wrapped up our panel for us. So yes, that was perfect. Thank you. And I agree. We get those questions at United Way too. How can I help programs that are serving children of color? So I would totally echo what you said and wholeheartedly agree that that's what we should be reaching out for. So thank you. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your night. See you soon.